Ingrid, Deborah, can you hear us?
Yes.
We're having with the connection, so we'll be able to hear you through the phone, but not see you.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
We'll still pull up the agenda and be able to follow along that way though.
Deborah and Ingrid, so we can see you on our laptop. It's just everyone else here in that room can't see you. So we see you. So we'll kind of move forward knowing that that's
Come
the
get
case.
a vaccine and a free top.
We'll kind of help cue the meeting along if there are people who are here who can't see you. So we'll just kind of shepherd through it a little bit. Sorry about that.
Good to see you guys at the AME church. That's great. That was really neat. Good to see you guys there. Yeah. Something different. Yeah.
FYI, so Deborah is the
We're gonna have two items of the audits. One auditor is gonna be, she was zooming in, but you won't see her, but you can hear her. And then we have a presentation on the Chico strategic plan. Tony, our consultant there, also will be, you'll hear him. We can see him over there on our laptop. We can't, for whatever reason, get it projected here and up there, so.
Okay,
Anyway, it'll be fun. Yeah, it'll have to. That's frustrating, because he came in here early and he was working fine.
Oh, my God. No, really. That's good to hear. There you go. You know.
Oh. 1 minute. Welcome to the February 24th board meeting of the Butte County Association of Governments. If you could all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you like to call the roll? Board Member Connolly?
Here.
Board Member Lucero?
Here.
Board Member Ritter? Here. Board Member Kimmelshue?
Here.
Board Member Teeter?
Here.
Board Member Knuckles?
Here.
Board Member Kay Reynolds? Here. Board Member Calderon?
Here.
Board Member C. Reynolds? Board Member Jones? Here. Thank you. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone would like to pull? Seeing none, is there any public comment? None. Have a motion on consent?
Move to approve.
To approve. Second.
That was Deborah. Move to approve.
Got that, and Casey seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Nope. Moving on to action items, item number 7, acceptance of the BCAG fiscal audit and TDA audits for the cities in town and county.
Good morning, Board. Today we're presenting the financial audit of the BCAG financial statements for the year ending June 30th, 2021. I think you all received a hard copy in the mail. If you have that, you can follow along, or there's electronic copies also available on the website if you have those. The financial statements are submitted to the Federal Clearinghouse, State Controller's Office, Caltrans. Any of our funding agencies receive copies of these on an annual basis. So it's a required document. BCAG is also ensures that the allocated TDA funds are audited. So we go to the jurisdictions, well, we send an independent auditor to do an audit of the TDA funds that we distribute each year to ensure that they're being spent in the manner that they intended. I'm going to review some of the highlights of the BCAG audit, and then Ingrid Scheiplein is on via Zoom, and she will discuss the results of the audit. So if you have your statements, you can turn to page 3. Every year there's a management discussion and analysis included in the financial statements. It's about 10-page. It's narrative. It talks about, what all went on during the year. A lot of it should be familiar with you. We buy buses, things like that. And so that's always, if you want just a short read, that's the best thing to look over. On page 6 of that narrative, there is a comparative statement. We do 2 types of financial statements. We do government-wide, which is where everything is all lumped together on an accrual basis. And on page 6, you'll see that a comparative analysis with the prior year. And on there, you can get a sense that we have assets of $49 million for the year, liabilities of $14 million with net assets of $35 million. Most of that is in the bus category. If you look at page 7, you'll see a comparative statement of the activity for the year, and that's where you can see the change in our assets over the year. And you'll notice that we increased $4.6 million over the year, and that is directly related to the purchase of 6 new fixed route vehicles and 5 new paratransit vehicles. All of those were funded with federal grant funds. If you look on page 10, this is, as I like to say, my favorite page because it's the only one with color. There's a pie chart that describes the transit funding and the breakdown for the year. And in the current year, our passenger fares are 7.6% of the overall cost. Last year, it was at 14%, so it has dropped significantly in this year. And of course, that's due to COVID. And, we've been discussing that all along in the quarterly reports. We have had a bump up in the federal funding during the COVID period because we've got CARES funds, and that is what covers the losses of the transit fares these days. And then the TDA funds round that out. So the TDA allocations you do towards Butte Regional Transit help to support the remaining activities of the transit. So that pie chart kind of gives a breakdown of all of that.
Hey, Julie.
Then if you turn in, yeah.
This is Deborah. I just wondered real quickly, I'm just trying to find it on the website and I couldn't find it. If there was a quick reference, that you could point me to. I looked under audited financial documents and I looked under, meeting minutes.
The audited financial statements for this year, will be uploaded to the website after the meeting.
Okay,
Because it's approved.
all right,
But
no
we
worries.
mailed you-
Yeah, I
Oh,
did.
okay.
It's
Yeah,
at my
I guess-
office. It's okay. That's
Oh,
all right.
all right.
No
Sorry,
worries.
Deborah, I thought they were out there.
No worries.
Okay, all right, well, moving along. In the body of the financial statements themselves are the actual statements. And if you look on page 17, there's a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. It's basically an income statement. It shows all the activity, all the revenues, and all the expenditures. One thing I like to point out here is the salaries and benefits are about 1.8 million, which is consistent with what we've budgeted for the year. When you look at the government fund statements, you can see the types of funding that we're used to discussing: the state highways, the local transportation, state transit assistance, and the state of good repair funds. All of the others funds get distributed to the jurisdictions each year. So a lot of what we do is to pass funds through to the cities and the counties. State highway funds were about the same for the year. Local transportation funds, which is based on sales tax, went up quite significantly over the year, about $1 million, about 12%. So that was a pretty big jump in the sales tax funds. State transit assistance, which comes from the state of California, that was down a little bit. The two of those make up the TDA. Then there's the state of good repair, where we get annual allocations of about $300,000. We're accumulating those funds to use for the purchase of electric buses and infrastructure. On page 16 is the balance sheet. And what I'd like to point out there is the fund balances, and that's the amount that gets accumulated over time. Last year, we talked a little bit about the unassigned fund balance that BCAG holds, and last year it had dipped quite low. I think the auditor spoke to that a little bit, and this year we have been able to increase that a bit. We also have roughly $3 million apportioned for transit capital to use at some point in the future, and we have $4.5 million of unapportioned TDA funds that we will anticipate putting into future allocations. Okay, good. Looks like she's got some hard copies. Then I'd like to point out on page 20 is the transit report. And you can see there that the revenues from the fares is $721,000. That's down $600,000 from the prior year. The operating expenses are down slightly for the year, which is probably due to the decrease in the demand for paratransit services. So we've had, less expense associated to that. And there is an increase in the net position of 1.8 million, and that again is related to purchase of the buses. On page 46, I like to point out there's a note that breaks down the transit revenue and expenditure and discusses the fare box revenue. And this is something that we do present with each quarterly transit report. And by system, the rural fixed route, the urban fixed route, and rural and urban paratransit. And I like to point out that that is a note in the financial statement. It is audited, and it is consistent with what we presented in the fourth quarter transit report last September. So there's lots in there. If you ever have any questions, you can always call me, and I can help you walk through it a little more. So I think now, Ingrid, are you are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So, Ingrid, I've distributed your list of discussion points. So, if you'd like to take it away.
Okay. Is that going to be up on the screen or is it just
No,
available?
we don't have you on the screen yet.
Oh, no, I mean the outline.
No, I gave them a hard copy, so they do have it in their hands.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question? This is Deborah. Was this ever available to the public? Was it posted anywhere?
The financial statements will be posted to the public apparently after the meeting.
But I just wondered from a standpoint of the public, trying to follow this. I don't know if that's standard practice, but it seems like those should have gone out with the agenda. And I'd just like to clarify that at some point.
Typically, we do not do that. We have the audits prepared with BCAG and the TEA. We do not put them out to the public until they've been accepted by the board. This has been
Okay.
followed. I don't for us to fight them.
I'm just not familiar. I'm not familiar with after the fact. I just thought when you have an agenda item, you attach the document so the public can review it. So that's my question. I didn't realize that we did it after the fact.
Yeah, I guess we could provide a copy with the agenda in the future to let the public see them when the agenda goes out. Certainly if they were to call and ask, we would provide.
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
It's not accepted, but
I just think it would
We
be
do
less
provide them.
confusing to the public. It's difficult to follow without something.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I guess you're up, Ingrid.
Okay, I'm here today to just discuss the highlights of the results of the audit. The first section of your agenda or summary lists the reports that we issued. We issued the auditor's opinion on the financial statements, which is the document that Julie discussed. We also issue a separate report on internal control and compliance. There's also 2 additional letters. One of them contains certain required communications, and the other one is a management letter containing recommendations. And then there's also the auditor's opinions that we issue on the TDA funds of the county and the various cities that receive TDA funding. I'll start with discussing the independent auditor's report. This report is referred to as an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements. So that states that the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. BCAG prepares its own financial statements and is responsible for the amounts and disclosures. And so our role is to verify the numbers and then ensure that it is complete and in compliance with the government accounting standards. I'm just going to touch real briefly on the significant activity since Julie had already highlighted that. She did mention the sales tax revenue increase. That's money that is in the Transportation Development Act and State of Good Repair Fund. So those flow directly through to the jurisdictions. And there was about a $700,000 increase. Also, the restricted funds in Butte Regional Transit increased. Every year there's an apportionment that is made to the jurisdictions, but then also some of the funds are retained within the local transportation fund to be held for future capital needs. And so that reserve was increased during the year from 1.6 million up to 2.2 million. Another significant activity in the financial statements is the purchase of about 3.5 million of buses, most of that being funded with federal grant funds, more specifically CARES Act funds. There were 6 new fixed route buses, bus purchases, and also 5 paratransit buses that were purchased during the year. Also, the fair revenue ratio that Julie pointed out on page 46, the only route that meets the minimum 10% requirement by the State Transportation Development Act is the rural fixed route that's just slightly above the 10%. The other routes are under the 10%. However, there's been a couple of assembly bills that have been passed that waive that minimum requirement, at least at this point through fiscal year 23. So the fact that you're not in compliance with that ratio, there's no monetary consequence to that until because of that waiver. We also issued a report on internal control and compliance that's within that same document. The areas that we discuss compliance on within that report are Transportation Development Act, Cal OES Prop 1B, and federal grant requirements. The report on internal control indicates that we noted no weaknesses in internal controls. BCAG has good internal controls in place despite small staff size. We look at whether there's good segregation of duties, and we determine that there's good controls in place. The report also states that we noted no compliance issues that are material to the financial statements. So we look at compliance of a number of areas, Transportation Development Act requirements. Also, because of the federal funding that was received during the year, there's about $10 million of federal grant funds that were expended during the year, of which 4.3 million was CARES Act money. And so we determined that BCAG complied with the federal laws and regulations governing those funds. And then we also look at the Prop 1B funding through Cal OES and Caltrans that was received, and determined that BCAG was in compliance with those requirements as well. The next item on the agenda is the required communications letter. Indicated in that letter is that we noted no adjustments to BCAG's accounting records as a result of our audit. So I think that reflects the fact that Julie does an excellent job in identifying all the closing entries during her process, and that the accounting records are clean and in good shape when she turns those over to us. So that's excellent, the fact that there's no adjustments or changes that we made to the numbers. There were 2 unadjusted differences that we noted that were immaterial. They're listed in the letter, and we did not adjust for those. The letter also states that we noted no difficulties in performing the audit. If there were any difficulties, we would need to bring those to your attention. We did perform the audit remotely, and so Julie did have all of the documents uploaded to our portal in a timely manner so that we could perform the audit efficiently. The letter also states that if there were any unusual accounting practices, we would need to bring those to your attention, and there were no such items. The next item are the claimant audits. So we perform audits for all of the jurisdictions that you represent, that in which the TDA funds are dispersed to determine compliance with those allocations. There was just one audit that was not included in the packet, the Gridley Senior Taxi Fund. The city was still working on closing the books. We actually did receive the information to do that audit yesterday, so we will be able to complete those by the March 31st deadline. The only finding that we had in those in performing those audits that's listed as a finding in the report is for Gridley, because of audit adjustments made in past years have not been reflected within their books. So we're recommending that BCAG work with Gridley to make sure that those adjustments are made. There's been a lot of turnover in staff there. So I think they're in the process of getting things caught up. The last item is the management letter. And so this indicates that the items that are listed in this letter are not considered material weaknesses, but just areas of improvement. And all of the comments in there stem from the TDA compliance portion of the audit, not related to BCAG's controls or processes. So those are listed here. There's various items such as late filing of street reports, county not accruing the TDA money to match the time frame of BCAG's apportionment, the Gridley adjustments, Gridley completing the closing entries for the senior taxi fund, so the audit can be completed by March 31st. And then Chico has a large TDA fund balance of about 4.6 million. So we're just recommending that BCAG monitor to ensure that there's projects identified for the use of those funds. So overall, the audits were clean, nothing significant noted during the audit. Are there any questions or areas of clarification I can provide?
I have a question. This is Deborah. On the Chico TDA balance, what kinds of projects can that be used for? And how long can a balance be held over?
So the majority of the 4.6 million is for streets and roads. And the TDA doesn't really have a set guideline as far as how, what period of time those funds can be held. And we recognize that, oftentimes there's large projects that other funding sources need to be secured, and the TDA money is then used for matching funds. So there does need to be some buildup or accumulation to have enough funding for some of the larger projects. I know BCAG staff is aware of this and is monitoring, working with the city to ensure that there is projects for the use of those funds.
Okay, thank you.
And Debbie, you were specifically talking about what she mentioned about the city of Chico, was that correct?
Yes, it was the 4.6 million that she mentioned, I believe, TDA funds. Yeah.
And we are monitoring that. We're in close contact. We have a TAC committee, and we meet with the public works directors and have a pretty good handle on what it is they're using those funds for. It doesn't come as a surprise as us when we get this comment, but road projects are very expensive, so it seems shocking, but it's probably a small amount of money when in terms of all the road projects that do need to get done.
So what kind of projects are they doing with that? It doesn't sound like a lot to me. I get it. Road projects are expensive, but I'm just curious what they're holding the money for.
Yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head.
It could be maintenance, or they.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
It's probably for maintenance, or it could be for a project that they're kind of saving the money to do because they don't have enough to start it. And most cases they leverage the TDA funds.
Okay, thank you.
Yvonne is a great resource for that. He works very closely with them, and as he develops the STIP, these funds and projects are included. So he could probably tell you off the top of his head where I usually just deal with the numbers.
I get that. All right, thank you.
My question is just related to, I know that this year and through 23, we don't have to meet the fare box recovery. Do we anticipate that is going to change, or what is the plan kind of as we forecast into the future if we continue to not?
That's a great question, really. I know that there are changes afoot in the TDA administration or, the program that runs it at Caltrans, and they're talking about eliminating, reducing, because they realize that nationwide, this has been an issue even prior to COVID. COVID just, blew it out of the water. And so, there is some thought that will change in the regulation. There's been talk of it for years. But from our perspective, we're also in the middle of a route optimization study, and we're planning on making changes to our system as well. So I would imagine over the next few years in regards to transit, there'll be a lot of shakeup and, figuring out what that actually means and how that translates. So.
But something that's looked at, like when we look at our arena, we look at, constructing or creating more affordable housing and things of that nature. Do we look at what the impacts could be? There's always like parking requirements and things like that, that if transportation were something that were included as opposed to, that people have to pay. Has there ever been any?
Well, that sounds like we do a transit study, a forecast, again, this is not numbers, so.
Right, yeah. I was just not so much like a forecast, because the forecast is looking at what we're doing. Right, and proposing that we're continuing to do that same thing in the future. And so I was just curious, especially when we know that we're not meeting the fare box recovery rates, that it's really challenging to, and yet that continues to be the
And again,
stick.
TDA is just in California. We're the only state that has that. And as Julie said, everybody in the state, nation is dealing with ridership drops because of COVID. And we're going to get back to normal. I expect the state, they're obviously aware of that, to continue to allow us to not stick to the fare box recovery ratio, because nobody can really do statewide right now. I don't think it'll impact the funding, and at that for a number of years. We just don't know at this point.
I had a question too, and I think it's basically what Tammy just asked. TDA means what?
Transportation Development Act.
Okay, that's the money that comes to us.
That's the act, right? And
Right.
It's derived from 1/4% of the sales tax from each county, comes back to each regional agency like BCAG statewide. And then there's provisions as to what that money can be used for. It has to be meeting transit needs first, and then bike pedestrian type stuff. If all those needs are met, and talk about the unmet needs process after a few items, but that's tied to this, then money can go to the streets and roads to the city.
So does that money help subsidize ridership?
Yes.
Okay, that's what Tammy was getting at.
Correct.
Okay, great.
We put the budget together, we look at all our federal funds, we look at fares, and then that TDA is what we need.
It's part of that pie chart.
Right, part of that pie chart, and
Yeah.
there's also federal money that comes.
Yep,
Because we
exactly.
try to fund this transit
Right.
system, about 10 plus, all the other sources, and then once we've exhausted those, we usually take about 5 million, leave from everybody, or, through a portion, but, and fund the rest of the transit.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, and I think Tammy was getting at this too, that we are not in jeopardy of losing or
No.
having to reduce routes because
No.
the subsidy may not be there.
I think
The
it's,
route optimization study that Julie mentioned, we are looking at that because we want to look at, is there can we improve the service out there so more people ride it, after COVID? So we're looking at that. It's not a required thing, but it's just, good planning to make sure that we're providing the best service, best cost of the funds we use.
and in terms of losing it, we don't really, it's kind of a weird thing. It's like the money comes to our county no matter what. Just a matter of when can you spend it, and so, and if they start slapping everybody's hands for not meeting fare box, they're gonna do something about it, because it's not sustainable, and
And I'm sure public transportation is a big
huge,
item, and
Yeah.
it's very important,
Yeah.
obviously, so.
yeah.
Okay,
We're not gonna let that go
I
down.
agree, I got that answer. So, and then the second thing is, we got $3.5 million to purchase new buses, new vehicles.
Yeah,
And we purchased 11, is that correct?
correct.
Okay, so I did my little math.
Uh-huh.
That's about $318,000 per vehicle.
Yep.
Is that?
I mean, on average.
Is that how much we're spending on vehicles?
Yes.
A big bus, the 40-foot buses you see, those are right now, diesel buses are probably 100 to 700,000.
Wow, okay.
As we move into transitioning the fleet to electric vehicles, those buses, an electric bus is gonna cost about $1 million.
That's why we're saving so much
That's
money.
more than a rice harvester. Okay, I mean, I suspected that they probably
Good question.
did cost that much, but, yeah,
I know, it's,
wow.
I know, it is.
$1 million per bus, wow.
And the smaller buses are paratransit buses.
Yeah.
That we operate, we actually get funding from the state under the 53 program, so we don't generally buy those, we get the grant funds. Just those, but big buses, yeah, we purchase either through our capital reserves or federal grants that we receive.
Okay, great.
I don't want to extend the conversation too long, but I do want to just offer up a little something of, I think what's coming, generally speaking. So the TDA's intent is to address transit needs. What's been left over, we can address for, the local needs of the jurisdictions and roads. What's changing is there's a large focus on public transit, intermodal transportation, housing. So in terms of Tammy, what you're describing, what we are likely to see is more increased pressure upon agencies like us, regional agencies, to try to direct as many of those TDA dollars into investments that support that. So what we likely will be bringing to the board in the future as that changes, as legislation changes in the state, is we'll probably be talking more about how TDA funds public transit and how that public transit enhances the goals of what the local jurisdictions are going to be driven to begin looking at for housing. So it's all, the big pictures, it's all kind of coming together. So this idea of a fare box recovery ratio, it kind of goes out the window a little bit when you start thinking about how you're going to invest in that type of a goal. So it's likely that that ratio will maybe not go away, but it's probably continue to not be enforced. And from that standpoint, we would continue to want to try to recover some funds from people using the system. It doesn't make a lot of sense to just make everything totally free all the time. We do need the people that use the system to help fund some revenue for it. So the picture is it's changing. So we'll be talking about that in the future as we move forward.
That was a really good description. Almost like a ratio, like instead of it being 10%, however many people are being served that fall into a particular income bracket or rural area, so.
So we need to accept the audits.
Move to approve?
I second.
Are there any public comments? None.
Thank you, Ingrid.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? On to item number 8, public hearing for BCAG's FTA Section 5310 grant application. Sarah.
Hi, good morning. As you saw on item 4, BCAG is applying for FTA Section 5310 funds to purchase paratransit replacement vans. These regulations require that we have a public hearing here today to determine if there are any other nonprofit agencies that are readily available to provide paratransit service. And upon completion of the public hearing today, we can proceed to provide and continue for 5310 funding. So I would just request that the public hearing be open.
So we open the public hearing at 10:35. 9:35, excuse me. The clock up there is
Yeah.
wrong. You need to
It's
call
only
it
right
out.
half of the year.
Okay, 9:35, is there any public comment? Did you hear from any nonprofits interested in doing this?
I did not. No, we posted something in the newspaper and sent a letter, and I haven't heard anything.
This is Deborah again. I just have a question. When you send a letter, who do you send it to? Like, do you send it to the nonprofits in Butte County or the area, or how does that work?
So we sent a letter to Work Training Center and 211. Those are the services that provide nonprofit transportation in Butte County. We also did post in the Paradise Post.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board? We'll close the public hearing at 9:36. The action you wanted from us, right?
Yes, thank you.
Moving on to items for information, item number 9, Butte Regional Transit second quarter report. Gloria.
Morning, board. So as you know, every quarter we present key financial and statistical results for how Beeline is doing. And this is the report for the second quarter of fiscal year 2021-22. So as you all know, we are not meeting fare box recovery ratios, but we do present financial data to compare the second quarter results to the annual budget from the prior year. And then there is also an operations table that presents performance-based assessment in comparison to the same quarter of the prior fiscal year. The measures of revenue, expense, ridership, vehicle revenue hours, and passengers per vehicle revenue hour are broken down by the 4 types of service: fixed route and paratransit, both urban and rural. This separation helps to define where improvements are needed and what issues are taking place, if any. The fare box ratios for the quarter are presented for reference only. It's only the one at the end of the year that actually gets reported to TDA, and it's only the one at the end of the year that actually counts officially. The comparisons being made in this memo are to the previous fiscal year, which was fully impacted by the effects of COVID-19. While the overall loss of fares continues to cause problems across the board in meeting fare box ratios, the aforementioned assembly bills have been passed to waive that requirement through the end of next fiscal year, 22-23. Funding from CARES continues to help cover lost fare revenue during this time. It should be noted that although we're not meeting fare box in any area, the ratios are all rising in the four modes of transit. So we're still seeing an increase comparatively. Unlike last year, when most of the quarterly ridership comparisons saw large reductions as the data was being compared to previous non-COVID year, this year's data is showing dramatic increases as it's being compared to the extremely low ridership generated during the height of the COVID lockdown. Even though the ridership is trending upward, that is only in relation to the low numbers from the previous year. So rural fixed route is not meeting TDA fare box requirement of 10%. It's coming in at 9.4% for the fiscal year. Ridership for the quarter was up 25% from the prior year quarter. Passenger fares were 45% of the annual budget, so we're still about right on target for where we expected passenger fares to be as a portion of the budget. And expenditures for services and supplies are 53% of the annual budget. So we're still doing pretty good as far as what we expected to be spending. Urban fixed route is, again, not meeting its 20% requirement for TDA fare box. It's coming in at 8.4%. Ridership did increase 59.8% compared to the prior year quarter. Passenger fares were 56% of the annual budget, and expenditures are in line with the budget expectations at 52%. Rural paratransit is coming in at 6.4% for fare box recovery ratio. Ridership was up 4.4% for the quarter, and passenger revenues for the quarter came in at 53% of budget. Expenditures for the service are coming in at 37% of the annual budget, and that's because the efficiency of the system is starting to move back. So we're able to put more passengers on the same vehicle and not spend quite as much money as what we were expecting to in order to transport those people. So we're at 2.8 passengers per vehicle revenue hour, which is pretty good. We like to be around 3 passengers per vehicle revenue hour, so 2.8 is good. And then for urban paratransit, farebox is coming in at 7.7%, so below the 10% that's needed. And ridership was up 53.7% for the quarter. Passenger revenues came in at 62% of budget, and expenditures are at 37% of budget, with 3.2 passengers per vehicle revenue hour. So we're doing really great with the efficiency of that system. System-wide, there were 8 accidents in the quarter, which is very unusual for us. That was with 360,746 miles driven. This comes in at a little over every 45,000 miles. This does not meet our performance goal, but only 2 of those accidents were preventable. So this is not the fault necessarily of our drivers. This is other people on the road are still being reckless. And we had 1 valid complaint for the quarter with 135,230 passengers served. That's it. Any questions?
I have a question, and you probably don't have the answer today, but I would ask it next quarter when you do it. I would be interested in what percentage of the normal ridership before COVID is our ridership today?
I can get that for you after the meeting. We do have comparisons like that.
I'd like to.
Sure.
So we can
yeah.
see as we're making progress to get back to where we used to be?
Yes. We can add that to the quarterly report starting next time. Sure.
I have a question. With inflation approaching 8%, it hit us hard, right, on the fuel cost. Will we look at a fair?
I think right now we're focusing more primarily on the route optimization study. We want to do everything we can to avoid another fare increase since our last one was in 2019. But
It's a business.
It is a business.
That's up to the board. We do annually, or I don't know if we say annually, look at, potential increased fares. Up to the board, we're going to be bringing a draft budget for BCAG and Beeline Transit next month. So I guess we could lay out a possible fare increase for.
I think we should go through one more quarter and see what the impacts are. But if we start running too far in the red, we have to.
We can still provide the information as part of staff's memo. Typically, what we've done is when we do a fare increase, it seems like we kind of, our fiscal year's July 1 to June. We can start a fare increase like January 1 or something, but we'll bring it as information as part of the draft budget, just so you kind of have an idea of the magnitude of a fare increase we would propose.
We do look at it every 3 years, but I think certainly with COVID, hard to.
That inflation's taken off. This morning, it's not going to get any better. Market's crashing. Oil prices are 150 barrel. Inflation's going to go really high. Also, we have to. Not wanting to do it, I'm suggesting we should look at it.
The fare policy actually will be looked at as part of the route study, so we should have more information on that soon.
Any other questions? Maria? Oh, you're up next for number 10 as well, on that transit needs.
Okay, this is just an item for information to let you know that we have opened the door for the 30-day comment period for the unmet transit needs process. As the administrator of the TDA funds for Butte County, BCAG is responsible for performing an annual unmet transit needs process. This process, it requires at least one public hearing for the purposes of soliciting comments that may exist within the county. In Butte County, the UTM process entails a comprehensive public outreach program culminating in the public hearing before the BCAG Board of Directors. For 30 days before the public hearing, testimony is solicited regarding perceived unmet transit needs that may be reasonable to meet. The purpose of this process is to ensure that all unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet are met before funds are expended for non-transit uses, such as streets and roads. The testimony is then analyzed to determine if there are any transit needs that meet the adopted definitions of unmet transit needs and reasonable to meet. This analysis report, the Transit Needs Assessment, is reviewed by the SSTAC, the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, and which provides a recommendation on the findings to the BCAG Board of Directors. If the board determines there are unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet, those needs must be satisfied before any TDA funds can be expended on non-transit purposes. The public hearing is set for next board meeting, March 24th, 2022, before the BCAG Board of Directors. And it's normally scheduled time. And then included in this was also an attachment of what was posted in the newspapers. We posted it in the Gridley Herald in English and in Spanish, and in all other newspapers, it was posted just in English. We will be posted later today on our website and sent out in email form in English, Spanish, and Hmong.
Do we have any flyers? Or?
That is the flyer. Yeah, that is the flyer.
Probably. As so that any resident can come in and pay bills or whatever, they can take one of the flyers.
Yes, we can give you some if you would like to take back to Gridley. They will also be posted in all 3 languages on all of the buses.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
This, item number 11 is, for an addition.
Just the handout since.
It's a handout.
You have the Zoom. Send you a copy of what the slides are. Put them in.
Unfortunately, you can't follow along with the PowerPoint, but the slides should be okay.
Agenda doesn't even have this item on it. The revised. It should have. It's the one you gave me.
Chico.
It was revised.
Is anyone else missing it?
No.
All right, so we'll move on to the agenda item on the Chico to Sacramento Intercity Transit.
Okay, well, over the last 13 months, we have been working on the Chico to Sacramento strategic plan to provide a commuter bus service between Chico, Sacramento, and Stockton. In 2020, we received a Caltrans strategic partnership grant for the plan. You may remember that we did explore providing the commuter bus service back in 2014, which did document a favorable response by the public with supportive ridership projections. But due to population shifts from the Camp Fire and reduced demand with COVID, we decided it would be worthwhile to reassess the demand for the service. This new plan identifies ways to integrate the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority Route 3 with Beeline to a consolidated commuter route. And we began with working with our consultant, ARUP, whose project manager, Tony Bruzzoni, is on the line today in January 2021. The plan involved a service plan, park and ride analysis, multiple public outreach events, including surveys, presentations, and workshops, and a marketing plan. There is a link in the agenda packet to the draft final plan that we have on our website. Today, we'll cover the key findings from the plan and discuss next steps. And I'm going to hand it over to Tony to provide more details. And you can follow along in the slides passed out to you. Tony?
Thanks, Sarah. So on slide 2, this is the overview of the presentation. Just the overview and the objectives of why we were doing what we were doing. Service plans, we'll look at the marketing plan quickly, how much this all costs, and Sarah will follow up with next steps. So on the 3rd slide, the objective was to look and see if it's feasible to run bus service that people would actually use from Butte County, Chico, and Oroville primarily to Marysville, Sacramento, and also connecting with the Amtrak services, mostly in Sacramento, but a few in Stockton. The quick answer is it looks like service is warranted. And I'll explain that as we get through. In the project schedule, Sarah pretty much touched on this already. We started about a year ago. We had some outreach initially. So this is all during COVID, so everything was virtual. We started looking in the spring, we started looking at service scenarios, what the market was, how we could do the, how we could manage fares and operating costs. June and July was a park and ride analysis, which was actually a larger capital needs analysis. We were pretty much had all the elements of the plan by then. We went back in August and September to another workshop. And then we were developing the marketing plan at that point because the marketing plan needed the input from the workshops. Then we gave BCAG the draft report in December, made a few changes, and now you have it. Okay, so what's the reason to do this? Why spend money on this, and will it work? So the first thing we did is we looked at a lot of data in terms of how many trips are made on a daily basis between Butte County to Sacramento County, and then also to Yuba and to Sutter counties. And it's roughly about 5,000 trips between Butte County, so that's mostly Chico and Oroville, to Sacramento County, and it's about 1,000 trips a day, a little bit less than that, to downtown Sacramento. And as you can see, there's also a fair number of trips that go to Yuba County, which is Marysville, and mostly Marysville, and then there's a little bit higher number of trips that go to Sutter County, which is mostly Yuba City. The trips in Yuba City tend to be very, very dispersed. And this was all from cell phone data that we were able to package and get trips by day and type and origins and destinations. It's all anonymized, but it kind of gives us a good idea of where people are going. So there's a current bus operation. It's the Amtrak Thruway bus. In the past, it's only been available to people who are connecting to the trains. In Sacramento, there's 4 round trips daily. The state has a policy to devolve these to all these routes that they have. They have, I don't know, probably a dozen Amtrak Thruway routes in California. They're trying to devolve these to local agencies so that the routes can do more than just serve the trains, that they can serve passengers along the way. And the current service is really train schedule oriented, doesn't really serve the commuters or other types of trips. So in terms of the outreach that we did, again, we had 2 rounds of outreach. We also talked to committees and city staffs. We made some board presentations. In the first phase, about half the respondents said that they expected not to work from home, and there was a strong interest in Butte to Sacramento service. The second phase, we got feedback on the proposed service plan, which I'll talk about in and the key finding is one of the things we heard from folks is that they really want to, and this is actually typical for downtown Sacramento commuters, they really want to get in early. So they want to be in like between 6:45 and 7:30 in the morning. So that affects the departure times from Chico and Oroville, and then the return times. We had a lot of people wanting to return at roughly 5:30, 5:40. But also that's a pretty long day, so we made sure that we had a 4:40 departure also. About a quarter of the people think that they're going to be back in the office 5 days a week. I would expect we'll see that to start happening in the next month or so. And about a third think that they're going to be quite a bit less than that. So, I think we're going to see basically a 3 to 4 day a week work pattern. as we go forward. All right, so what is the proposed service? That's the next slide that says, it's the 8th slide, it says proposed service. So the idea was to make this a useful service for both commuters and rail passengers. And when we say commuters, we're not just talking about folks going to work in downtown Sacramento or to work in Marysville. We're also talking about people who might want to go to events in Sacramento and entertainment. There's quite a bit of medical trips to Sacramento from the data. So all of those things together, we're trying to develop a schedule that work for that. So we have a schedule that has 9 weekday trips per direction. 3 of those are in the commute periods in the morning and in the afternoon. 8 of the 9 trips connect with the Amtrak San Joaquin trains. Almost all the trips connect with the Capital Corridor trains to the Bay Area. On the weekend, there's 8 trips. It's the identical schedule, except the very earliest schedule is not. The very earliest bus trip is not run, and another trip coming back in the afternoon is dropped too. And so this shows you the map. It basically, we use the highway 70 to 99 and 70 to Oroville. We expand, and the capital plan talks about it, we expand the current Oroville Park and Ride facility, continue down SR 70 to Marysville, and then take 70 and 99 into Sacramento and I-5 into Sacramento. And then there's a route through downtown Sacramento that BCAG is developing for all the regional operators, and we're actually working on that. So that's going to be provided by the Sacramento region. 3 of the trips continue to the Stockton Amtrak station to make the train connections, because that's one of the conditions of the service plan and the continued funding. All right, so the capital projects are new highway buses, because these are long distance, so you can't just use a regular transit bus. Additional park and ride locations. Caltrans is looking at expanding or kind of fixing the current park and ride over by Highway 99 in Chico. We proposed a modification, actually a fairly large expansion of the Oroville park and ride lot to make it better for buses and passengers. And then we proposed a new Marysville park and ride site also. And that's mostly driven by Amtrak passengers who need a place to park their car. The idea is that this route piggybacks on investments that the city of Sacramento and BCAG are making at the Sacramento train station and the regional transit routing, which I talked about. And then there's another, the San Joaquin service is going to extend service, additional trains from Fresno and Bakersfield into downtown Sacramento, and they're adding a new Midtown station, basically at 19th and Q, if you know Sacramento. So the route serves both of those places. All right, so with all that information, we had a marketing plan that kind of backs up from the launch date and suggests that, you need to start probably 18 months out on branding, a style guide, logo, all that kind of stuff. 8 to 12 months out, you start with an advertising campaign, just getting people understanding that this is a new thing and it's coming. There's a big interest in working with Chico State. College students tend to be fairly high users of services like this. So either talking to the university about advertising it or perhaps getting additional contributions from them and expanding their existing bus pass that already works on Beeline to this service. That's another consideration. And then 3 to 6 months out and then closer in, everything just ramps up in terms of getting people excited and interested in what's going on. All right, so how much does all this cost? So from our ridership work, we from the 5,000 people that go back and forth every day, we think we can probably capture about 450 to 500 trips daily. So roughly 200 to 250 to 250 trips in each direction. There'd be a zone-based fare system like there are on most of these kinds of services, but we still assumed monthly discounts of about 30%. That schedule would cost about $2.5 million to run. We think we would get about $1 million in passenger revenue annually. And then the expected contributions, we'd still have contributions from the San Joaquin Rail Services and other sources. So there's a gap to fill, but it doesn't seem to be a huge gap. The capital costs are the capital program costs, and it's about half of it's a little more than half is vehicles, is $8 to $9 million. It needs 6 to 7 new vehicles that are appropriate for this service, and then the additional costs at the park and ride expansions. So with that, I'll pass it over to Sarah for next steps.
So we've recently had a lot of discussions with the San Joaquin Joint Powers Agency. As Tony mentioned, they currently run the Route 3 bus that the service would consolidate with, and due to delays that they have on their system with some of their Natomas extensions and a lot of other projects, and with a lot of the reduced demand that we've seen from COVID, we've thought to revisit the commuter bus service over the next year or so as part of the rail study that we're doing. That's also with the San Joaquins. Both parties are definitely still interested in implementing the service in the future, and we'll continue to update the board and our other committees as progress is made. I know that's a lot of information, but we'll take any questions.
Can I just ask a clarification? In the report that Tony gave, it sounded like he said anticipating between 200 to 250 today, and in this.
What is one way, one is one?
Yeah, so it could serve 450 to 500 trips daily. So that would be in both directions.
I have a question. This is Deborah.
Hi, Deborah.
Hi. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Tammy.
So earlier in the presentation, it was between 8 to 9 trips a day.
That's the number of
So that's
buses. There would be 9 buses going each direction daily.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, your turn, Deborah.
Yeah, I was just wondering how or if at all the new infrastructure bill plays into any of this, and if there is availability of funds for the purchasing of buses or anything like that, and if this is something we should try to take advantage of.
With the infrastructure package, there would be funding for purchasing buses. We would be looking at larger motor coaches that have Wi-Fi, bathrooms, so it would probably be a little more expensive than our normal fixed route buses, but it's definitely something that we'll keep our eye out as we look into the service in the future.
I was just going to say that, go ahead.
Oh, no, no, go ahead, John.
No, I was just going to say that, as Sarah said, yeah, we could explore the federal grants for capital. There wouldn't be any operating, but we could buses there. There's also state grants to try to purchase buses. But the big thing that makes this maybe possible down the road again is that there was some legislation passed in 2019 with Senate Bill 742, which would allow agencies like the San Joaquin JPA that operates the San Joaquin Rail, also the Altamont Quarter Pass Rail or rail lines, to contract with transit entities like us and provide that operating funds to operate that throughway bus, but also our commuter service. So that's something that, again, gives us the possibility of happening. But as Sarah stated, based on our discussions with the San Joaquin JPA last month, they're not prepared at this time to kind of move this forward, but they do want to, again, look at it in a year. And it's just due to their current workload of capital improvements to extend the passenger rail service to Natomas.
Okay, but we're not looking at multi-year, 5 years down the road. This is just a year delay because of San Joaquin.
And also, Deborah, with the reduced demand, as Tony mentioned, just with a lot of people working at home right now with COVID, we'd like to relook at that demand over the next year.
Got it. All right, thank you.
On page, I think it's 3 or so, it says about 5,000 trips daily to Sacramento, and I'm wondering, were those segregated out of how many were going to downtown versus how many were going to the airport? Because I don't see us going to the airport on this, and I know that a lot of the trips going to Sacramento are going fine.
Yeah, we did hear from a lot of people that they wanted the service to service the airport, just with the connections that it would need to make with the trains. It's not feasible at this time, but as the service is implemented, it's something we could look at in the future. And there are other buses in the area that would serve the airport. So if we went to downtown Sacramento, they could hop on another bus and quickly access the airport.
There's a lot of, like you said, going with the train, looking at it, and Chico looking at air. So there's a lot of different agencies and things looking at that same 5,000 ridership. So I think pushing it off for a year to see, does Chico get air, and what ends up happening, give us a better picture of how much these people.
It's challenging too. I mean, this question comes up a lot. Service to the airport's almost like I always call it a separate animal. I mean, it's hard to work that in to this kind of service because the deviation to go to the airport and do that would take over half an hour to 45 minutes. So it's almost something that would need to be looked at separately, and probably more by a private entity, unless our local governments wanted us to look at it. But one of the possibilities down the road too is this extension of the rail service to Natomas. The Natomas station is going to be close to I-5. They plan to have a date or a hourly shuttle operating between that rail station and the airport. So if this were to move forward down the road, we do have this service. We can stop at the Natomas station, off there, and then take a shuttle to the airport.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
We do have a public comment on this matter.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead and read it if you can. One moment.
Hello, BCAG. I would like to make a public comment regarding agenda item 11 for your 2022 board meeting. Chico, Sacramento City Plan final update. Respectfully request that BCAG do all in your power to make the Chico to Sacramento intercity transit implemented as soon as possible. Do not allow this project to be delayed for another year or two. Improving intercity transit in Butte County and the surrounding region is critically important to mitigate the threat of climate change and to give residents options for regional transportation besides automobiles. Strategy 6H of the Butte County Climate Action Plan is to partner with BCAG and Butte Regional Transit to identify and implement needed regional transit improvements to improve connectivity countywide. Page 28 of BC CAP 2021. Butte County General Plan also calls for improving transit in ways that the Chico to Sacramento intercity transit would. See General Plan Policies, CIR, P4.1 and CIR-P4.2. We need to carry out a rapid expansion and improvement of transit systems. We need to do all we can to reduce VMT and GHGs to mitigate the most catastrophic impacts of climate change and to stay in line with Butte County's stated goals and policies. Please consider expediting the implementation of this project. We need intercity transit like this yesterday. Please do not delay in the implementation of this project. Thanks, Jared Geiser.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're not in a position to implement this all by ourselves. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Number 11 is,
That was item 11.
okay, item 12. My agenda is all wrong. Is item number 12 are things that the public may wish to talk to us about that are not on our agenda. Do you have any public comments? There's no one from the public here. So at this time, I will adjourn the meeting till next month. We'll meet on March 24th. Yvonne, you have something?
Yes, just real quickly, I just wanted to pass out some public events that are going on in Chico and in Oroville. Butte County is tagging along some free vaccine clinics and health fairs, which gives us an opportunity to inform the public of the various planning and programming projects that we got going on before we embark on the update of our long-range regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy, our federal transportation improvement program, the unmet transit needs process that was presented, the North Valley Passenger Rail Strategic Plan that will be under development, and BCAG's public participation plan. Staff will be at these vaccine, public health care clinics, just to try to educate the public, those who are interested in being part of the process.
Yeah, I want to compliment Yvonne. I visited him at the AMA church here in Chico. That was in January, right? Early January? Yes, sir. And so he was there with a group of other people that had other booths there, but I was very happy to see him there. So thanks, John and Yvonne, for being there. I was happy to see you.
Thank you. Seeing no public comment, we are adjourned until March 24th for our next board meeting. Thank you all.